This video is a review of this guy. This is the Jackery 500 portable power station. It's basically a giant battery with some plugs on the front of it. Jackery is not paying me for this review, but they did give me this thing for free in exchange for a video review. They also gave me discount codes and links, so if you want to pick one of these up for yourselves, you can check the description for that information for, I believe it's 15% off. Then there's one for Canada that's $100 off. This review, as I wander this campsite in the forest here, will have 8 different parts, and I've got all my notes here. I've written down everything that I want to cover. Those 8 parts are, if you want to jump to a certain one, I'll put the timestamps in the description. The first one is the short version, where basically I'll give you my summarized thoughts on the device and tell you if I think it's worth getting. Number 2, stats and features. Number 3, charging it. Number 4, how I used it. Number 5, how else it can be used. Number 6, what it's not for. Number 7, improvements. And number 8, final thoughts. Basically, I love it. I think it's really awesome. I've worked with Jackery in the past. They've given me a couple smaller portable power stations, basically giant batteries, to review in the past. This one's the biggest, and this one is also my favorite because it is the biggest. I used it on a 3-week-long car camping trip and a 3-day-long car camping trip. It worked great. It charged and powered all the devices that I had for it without any problems. I still had tons of battery life left over at the end of every day. It has completely replaced the DIY solar generator, you could call it, battery bank thing that I made, and I would suggest buying one of these if you don't want to make your own. And now that I've both made my own and used the store-bought ones, I highly recommend getting a store-bought one. If you're in the market for something like this, get it. It's great. You won't have any regrets. Capacity is really the most important thing when you're talking about something like this. So how big is it? What's the capacity of it? Depending on what unit, I guess, you want it in, it's 518 watt hours or 144,400 milliamp hours. And for context, that is about 4 times the size of my homemade one. Here it is in relation to other devices, some of which I've reviewed in the past, others of which I haven't. So this is just a little, portable one for your phone, stick it in your pocket or your backpack. Capacity 5,600 milliamp hours. Slightly larger one, 16,000 milliamp hours. Slightly larger one with the plug in the back is 20,800 milliamp hours. This one I think is 67,000, I wrote on the back, 67,000 milliamp hours, and then this is about twice as much, 144,400. So this is about 10 times what this is, and it has all these plugs built in, of course. It has a lithium-ion battery, which is a relatively small and lightweight type of battery. This thing weighs 13.6 pounds, according to my scale. I wouldn't go backpacking with it, but I mean, you can easily pick it up and, move it around when you need to. Move it from the house into the car or whatever you need to do. In the box, you get the power station itself, 2 charging cables, and a little pouch to hold the cables. One of the cables is a wall charger, so you plug it into the wall to charge the power station. The other charger is a car charger. You stick it into the 12-volt socket in your car to charge it up. So let's talk about the features of this guy. Let's start at the top left here. This is the input. This is where you charge the thing. You plug the cable in there. When it's being charged, this little blue light lights up. Here you have the DC cluster of inputs, or I guess outputs rather. You have this cigarette lighter 12-volt socket, and then over here you have some smaller ones. I'm not entirely sure what these are for. I think you can charge some laptops using this kind of cable, maybe some other small electronic devices. I never used these, so you'll have to tell me in the comments what you would use these for. 3 USB ports, 1 standard 110-volt wall outlet with a pure sine wave 500 watt inverter, and then the display, which you can press to turn on. Sorry, with the reflection it's kind of hard to see, but you can see it says input, output, and then the current battery charge level. And And then on the side, it has a little light. I never used this, but you know, why not have it, I guess. And then that's it. Those are basically all the features. And then of course, the handle, I suppose, is a feature, but that's it. What you see is basically what you get here, and everything works as it should. There are 3 ways to charge it. I touched on a couple of them. First, from the wall, plug it into the wall at home, charge it up. For me, this charged at 14% in an hour. So if it were at 86%, I plug it in, and in an hour, it's fully charged. If you do the math, that works out to be about 7 hours to be fully charged from 0, and that's what Jackery said it would be. They said 7.5 hours. So that's the first charging option. Second charging option is the car. For me, it was about 7% an hour, so about half the speed of the wall charger. So again, if it's at 93%, plug it into my car, I drive for an hour, it's fully charged. If you do the math, that works out to about 14 hours to fully charge it, and Jackery says 16 hours. And then third, you can charge it via solar. Now, Jackery makes their own solar panels. They have offered to give me one in the past. I have declined because I don't think their solar panels are a good deal. I think they're expensive for what you get. And so I used my own solar panel to do this testing. Jackery's own solar panel may be different. It probably is. It may be better, might be worse. I don't know, I haven't tried it. I used this 100-watt Renogy panel that I have on top of my car. It's just a standard 100-watt solar panel. I'll talk a little bit more about how I connected that panel to the power station in a minute, but for now, let me talk about just how fast it charged. Depending on the time of day and where the sun was, I got between 5 and 9% charge per hour. And that was doing it in the fall, now in October. If you do this in the middle of summer where the sun is stronger, more directly overhead, I think that's how it works, then you'll get more wattage, I would assume. And if you charge early in the morning, it'll be worse than in the middle of the day, and if there are clouds, it'll be worse than that. You know how it works. But basically, I got between 5 and 9% an hour, so if we average it out as 7%, that means that it would take 14.3 hours to fully charge it, and that's my experience, and Jackery says it would be 14 hours. So 14.3 to 14, very similar. My experience jives with what Jackery said it would be. Again, that's working with my solar panel. So the input here on the device, this is an 8mm input. And Jackery's proprietary panel, or the panel that they sell, goes directly from the panel to this. Standard solar panels have what's called an MC4 connector on the end. These are MC4 connectors. So basically, there are a couple of MC4 plugs on the solar panel on a short wire. I have another MC4 cable. This is a 5-foot long cable right here. On the end of those is another MC4 connection socket. And then this is the piece that really makes it work. This is a cable that goes from MC4 on one end, and the two parts come together. I can grab this to the 8mm plug. I've used a couple of these. The first one I had broke, but this one is working well so far, fingers crossed. I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to use your own solar panel to run, or rather to charge, the Jackery 500-watt power station. I forget how much I paid for this panel. I think it was around $120, $130, maybe $150, but it was somewhere in that region. I looked today and Jackery's panel is like $360, even with a 15% discount. I think that's just too much. But if you do want it, again, I'll have a link and coupon code in the description. You can get folding 100-watt panels on Amazon for around $220. I haven't used them personally, but they seem to get good reviews, and $220 is still much cheaper than Jackery's $360. So let me tell you a little bit about how I used this, because how I used it will be different from how you will want to use it, and everyone's use case is a little bit different. So basically I used mine to charge a bunch of batteries on my portable electronic devices. As I said before, I used it on a 3-week-long trip and then another 3-day trip. It worked great the whole time. In fact, when charging everything that I needed to charge, it never got below, I think, like 82 or 83% capacity. So it's a giant battery. It's really great to not even have to really worry about charging capacity. I'm gonna run through a list of devices that I charged, and I didn't do all of these at the same time. Like every night I didn't have to charge all of these all over again from zero. But in general, these are the devices that I was managing and using. 2 phones, 3 drone batteries, the drone controller battery, 3 GoPro batteries, 3 camera batteries, my little Amazon Fire tablet, a light, a fan, and I didn't take my laptop on these trips, but I tested it out at home quite a bit actually, so I have some information on that. So let's go over some of the stats here. To charge a drone battery, it took about 6% of the charge, so I'd be able to charge 16 drone batteries. I have the DJI Mavic Air, which has a pretty small battery. If you have the DJI Mavic Pro or a similar larger drone, you'll get fewer charges. I think like, I don't know, 9 charges maybe. For the GoPro batteries and the camera batteries, each battery took less than 1% off of the battery life, or around 1%. So I could get 90 or 100 charges of my GoPro and camera batteries off of that thing. My little portable USB fan that I really like, it has 2 options, like a low, or 2 speeds, a low and a high. On the low, it draws about 1 watt. On the high, it draws about 2 watts. And on the low, it could run for hundreds of hours. It, after, I think 4 hours, it went down 1% or something like that. And it's about twice as power consumptive on the faster speed version of the fan. So either way, you've got a lot of fan power. For the laptop, depending on what I was doing, it would use between 5 and 9% of the battery life per hour. I have an old MacBook Air. The battery on it is completely shot. Like if you unplug it, it'll immediately turn off. And so I didn't do a test of like how many times I can charge my battery, but instead how many hours it can run for. If I was just doing normal stuff, web browsing, word processing, it would suck about 5% battery life per hour. And then if I just had YouTube playing full screen, it would use about 9% an hour. So the math works out to where I could run my laptop for 11 to 20 hours. As far as recharging it during the day on those trips, it was either entirely charged or mostly charged, like high 90s at the end of every day. I was driving a fair amount each day, at least a couple hours a day, and between the solar and the charging it while driving, I never had any problem with charging it back up again. And then apart from how I used the battery, there are other things that you might want to do with it. So let me go over some other stats that Jackery provides. I didn't corroborate these, but from the other measurements I took, my experience and then the numbers that they provide are pretty similar. So I would assume that these are also pretty similar. They say that you can run a 40-watt DC fridge for 39 hours. I know that's something that a lot of you watching are probably interested in. You can charge an iPhone 8 50 times, an iPad Air 2 15 times. You can run a little LED light for 90 hours. You can recharge a 12-inch MacBook 7 times, and you can run a 60-watt 32-inch TV for 7 hours. And then apart from all of those uses and the uses that I talked about earlier, something like this is great for disaster preparedness. I've been in earthquakes before. This would be great to have if you're in an earthquake-prone region. My parents used to live in Houston, and a couple of years ago when that big hurricane, Harvey? Is that what it was called? Whatever it was called. When that big hurricane went through, they were living in an apartment complex, and the bottom 2 floors of their apartment complex were completely trashed. Thousands of houses were without power, so if you live in a hurricane or really any kind of natural disaster area, then something like this would be good for you to have just as a backup. If you sleep with a CPAP machine, then something like this can be, well, life-saving, really. I haven't done the research to know how long it'll keep the machine going for, but I know that some people have used it for that, and so it is a viable option for that if that is something that you need it for. It's great for camping in your car like what I do. It's great for tent camping. If you drive up to the campsite and pitch a tent, it's great for running all the electronics you need for that. If you're into tailgating or barbecuing, it's great for that. Really, anytime you need a portable power supply, but you don't need it to run an entire kitchen, basically, then this is for you. Now, as big as the battery is on this thing, and as much as it meets and exceeds my needs and expectations, you can't do everything with it. Basically everything that requires a lot of energy and that generates a lot of heat too, you don't want to use this for, you can't use this for. So a hair dryer, a power drill, an induction cooktop, an electric kettle, a heated blanket, did I say rice cooker already? A microwave, a curling iron, things like that. You can't use this device to power those. Those require a whole lot of energy, and it's more than what this device is made for. The little green LED lights on the buttons that you press to activate that cluster of plugs, the light on that is very bright, and this is a complaint I had when I reviewed their 240 watt model. It's just too bright for me at night in my car. I have to turn the thing away from me when I'm camping in my car so that it doesn't blind me. I can understand why it's bright, because during the day you would want to see it and make sure that it's on and charging or running your devices, but for me I think they're a little too bright. It's nothing a bit of duct tape or electrical tape can't fix. It's not a huge deal, certainly not a deal breaker, but just a little nitpick that I have. The biggest problem I have with this is that it turns off automatically after 6 hours if less than 10 watts is being drawn from it. And they say they do this to conserve power. I don't really know what the rationale is behind that. I don't quite understand that, but as a use case, let me explain how I encountered that. I thought it was a problem with the device, with the machine, with the power station, but no, it's designed to do that. So the fan that I hook up into the USB thing, it draws 1 or 2 watts depending on whether it's on the low or high setting. And I like to have that running when I sleep. If it's hot outside, I have it on me, but even when it's cold outside, I like to have the fan running because it circulates the air inside the car, and I found that that helps with condensation issues a little bit. And so I would turn on the fan at night, and then when I'd wake up in the morning, it would be off. And I thought maybe in the middle of the night I turned it off because, I don't know, maybe I got cold or something. But it happened repeatedly night after night, and so I eventually figured out that it was supposed to do that. I think it's kind of lame, but whatever. If you really don't want it to turn off, just plug something else in and, you know, make sure that more than 10 watts are being drawn. I think it's a little bit silly, but hey, that's the design decision they made. I personally don't like it, but it might be helpful for you. Next up, I think that dual input would be great. So I would love being able to have the car charger and the solar charger plugged into it at the same time, so it could be charged via both at the same time, or so that I just wouldn't have to move the plug from one to the other, because as it was on my trips, if I knew I was going to be away from the car for a while, for several hours, like to go hiking, I would plug the solar panel into it. If I was about to start driving, I needed to remember to unplug it and then plug the car charger into it so that it would charge while I was driving. As far as I know, there is no device on the market that has 2 inputs. There might be a technical reason, or maybe it's just not a broad enough use case to where they think that that would be useful, but ideally I would have 2 input sockets on a device like this. And then finally, I wish there were 1 or 2 more USB sockets in there, USB plugs in there. I happen to need the USB plugs more than the other ones. Again, your use case might be different. Thankfully, this isn't a huge deal. This problem is easily solved. I've ordered one of those little 12-volt socket plug things that has the two USB ports inside of it. And so I can just plug that into the 12-volt socket, and then that gets me 2 more of the plugs. And so it solves that problem. And of course, you can get sockets that have, you know, 6 or 8 or 10 more USB ports on it if that's what you need. Overall, it's a great device. I'm happy with it. If I were in the market for something like this, I would save up the money and buy it. I like it. I like how small it is. I like how compact it is. I like how how portable it is. It's a really useful device, it works great, and even with those few little nitpicks I had, I'd still buy the thing. I still really like it. Hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, there are links and coupon codes or discount codes in the description, and I'll try to remember to put them in the comments too, so you can see those as the top pinned comment. And I'll see you guys in the next video.